Welcome to Grace Church, a fellowship that's been serving the South Coast for over 23 years. Grace Church is more than a congregation. They're a family of believers who are ready to welcome you to a place where you can feel the tangible grace of God. Join Grace Church every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. for a time of contemporary worship and a relevant message from the Word of God. For more information, please visit gchurch.us. And now here's Pastor Ron Moore with this week's timely message.
The world's going to hell in a handbasket. The world is going to hell in a handbasket. The world is spinning out of control. The world is going disastrously the wrong way in so many areas. But this is what I really am concerned about, is the church is spinning out of control. And we look around and think, well, what in the world am I going to do about it? I'm just one man. But you see, when the world was going out of control in Elijah's life, he didn't look to anything. There was priests, there was people, he could have done anything he wanted to do, and he rose up one man, and that one man changed the entire structure of what was going on in the world around them, and he changed the entire structure of a nation to turn back toward God, and that was one man who lived in a world that was going to hell in a handbasket. When I was a young man, before Debbie and I were married, we were very young. We got married very young. And nobody thought that marriage would ever last because, my goodness, we were young. Oh, we were so young. I'm not even going to tell you how young we were, but we were young. And things were kind of getting serious, and you know how, maybe you don't know how, but Debbie began to talk like marriage stuff, like future stuff, like here I am, I'm just a dumb young man, and she's saying things like, well, how many children do you think a married couple ought to have? I got scared. Yeah, man, I got nervous. Now she doesn't believe this. She believes other lies that the devil has told her. But the really truth of the matter was I wasn't sure that first of all, she was a woman that I was going to marry, that I should marry, and that we were way too young, and basically we had never dated anybody else. That's how, we were very young. And my friends would say, man, you're going to be married and fun is over, and you're not going to be able to go skiing with us. And up in Washington, I skied every weekend, and it's going to be a whole different story. And oh my goodness, And I began to waver a little bit. You ever wavered a little bit? Yeah. Now listen to me. Debbie has another story about this tall girl. Okay. This has gotten better with the telling, believe me. Wavering doesn't do you any good. One day I made up my mind. One day I quit wavering. One day I realized that, and I'm pretty happy about this, by the way, I decided that girl is a girl I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. I'm glad I did that. She's not that happy about it, but I am. God's calling us to stop wavering. Wavering does nothing. When God says move, move. When God says speak, speak. When God does anything, we've got to give it all to the Lord, right? That's what we're talking about. God has to be first. Exodus says this. Exodus 20:13 says, you must see, it's not that we should put God first, put him in first place. It's you got to do it. He expects it. He demands it. You must have no other God before me but me. I'm the only one. In Matthew, Jesus says it this way. When they came and they said, well, now which is the greatest of all these commandments? Jesus said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Is there anything else left? No. So James says it this way. He says, the one who doubts is like the wave of a sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded, unstable in all that they do. So God has to be first in our life. You know why? Because unless God is first place in your life will spin out of control. It will. I've been preaching now for, Lord, well over 40 years. And there's something I've watched over and over and over again. It happens over and over and over again all the time, and that's this. Is that if we don't put God first in our life, things begin to crumble underneath us. Our families begin to break, or our health begins to break, and then we begin to say, well, I'm just having a run of bad luck. And I'm telling you that if you seek first the kingdom of God, he says this, all things will work out. We'll supply all the other things that you need. First of all, you just come in and sell out to God. Let's talk about the life of Elijah. It's a little bit of a review, but it'll be okay. Elijah was an Old Testament prophet. He's in the book of 1 Kings. Israel had stopped putting God first. That's what had happened. Israel, remember the divided kingdom, Israel had stopped putting God first. And it wasn't they didn't love God. It wasn't that they didn't worship God, but they just served other gods also. There were just other things in their life. Like God wasn't the most important thing. And they began to follow idols. That's what we're talking about today. And false gods. The two main ones was Asherah and Baal. Asherah was the god of sex. She was the god of sex, and Baal, on the other hand, was the god of prosperity. And so they began to waver between the two. Oh, there it is. My screen in the back didn't have all this good stuff on there. By the way, I had to go, it was pretty difficult to figure out the slides for Asherah because she was a pretty lewd person. In other words, it was X-rated worship. To worship her, you had to go to the temple and sleep with prostitutes. That was part of it. And so the idolatry, those things that they hold in their hand, it was pretty hard to show you because some of them are just horrific. It's all pornographic. Baal was a god of prosperity, and he was often depicted as a bull, and sometimes as an oven. That's an amazing thing. I have an idol that looks like an oven. And he was a god of the economy. And so they took these two deities, the god of prosperity and the god of sex, and they began to worship that. Isn't that dumb? I mean, you look at that and think, how primitive is that? That they would just take, like an inanimate object and begin to worship it. Do you know what I'm saying? They would just take something that does, and it would take all of their time and all their energy there just to. I can't even imagine anybody worshiping an idol in this day and age. Can you? Well, we may not be worshiping these two idols, but we do worship prosperity, and we do worship sex. Everything in America is sold on sex. Every decision has something to do with money. There's a saying in America: if you want to find out where the crime is, follow the money. We watch those shows, haven't we? In this day and age, isn't this something that today? That the way that people describe themselves now, the way that we have our identity, is that people are saying their pronouns, their things that they identify themselves with, all has to do with sex. Well, what are you? It used to be, well, I'm a farmer. And what are you now? You got 117 different designations you can be, and all of them deal with your view of sexuality. Don't think that we don't serve a sexual god. And we may not be worshiping Baal, but I want to tell you something. You touch our economy, and our nation crumbles. Because that's where we are. So an idol is really anything that you value more than God. An idol is anything you value. Where you put your value. What is important to you? I can always tell what people value by what they talk about. Because what you value, you will talk about. What you value, you'll put in your home. If you walk into a man's house, and in his front room, he has a 6-point elk mounted on the wall, you know something about that man right away. I used to have a friend of mine. He had a big steelhead. I mean, it was the biggest steelhead I'd ever seen, and he had it mounted in his front room, and he had the lure that he caught it on was hanging from that. And when you walked in, he would say, "Yeah, I caught that in '84." By the way, he didn't have. If you're doing that, either one or two things: either you're not married. An idol is anything you seek that only God can give you. I mean, all these things that we talk about, and we're going to talk about idolatry in the life that we live in right now, but when we seek things, and the things that we're seeking, the things that people are seeking in this world, all the idols that they have, we'll talk about them a little bit, but as we begin to think about them, it's what are the things that I need that only God can give me that I'm looking for in other areas? The human heart's an idol factory. It produces all kinds of idols. My heart, sometimes if I begin to ask God to show me all the areas of my life that I have put things in front of God. Over the last 2 months, actually, I've been doing that. And God's begun to show me some things and try to help me in this, try to get my mind away from those things that I think that are more important at times than God. Colossians 3:5 says it this way. It says, "So put to death the sinful earthly things lurking," I love this verse. I love the way he puts it there. "Lurking within you." Lurking within you. This is the New Living Translation, but it's good. That's a good definition. "Have nothing to do with sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires. Don't be greedy, for a greedy person is an idolater. Worshiping the things of this world." Worshiping the things of this world. And it's easy, when you think about that. The big ones, sex, power, money. I mean, we don't worship those things. Those are the big things. We understand that. But there's something else you need to understand, is that idols aren't always bad. Not always the bad things. Idols are often good things that we put in God's place. Idols can be anything. Your pet could be your idol. But pets are good things. Well, maybe not cats. I'm not going to go anywhere. Idols are not inherently bad. It's when we put them in place of God. I mean, I'm telling you right now that money is not inherently bad. Do you begin to worship money? There's nothing wrong with money. Like, money isn't evil. It's the love of money that causes it to be evil. When you begin to worship money, there's nothing wrong with sex. All it's done the way that God explained it to us. It's good. Unless you begin to pervert it and use it. I'll do this my way. This is the way I'm going to do it. Oh, okay. It's just that it becomes idolatry. Career can be an idol. Begin to get all of your identification for what you do. Men are the worst about this. We take our identity from the things that we're producing. This is what I am. I'm a carpenter. I'm a mill worker. I'm a truck driver. I'm whatever I am. That's what I am. And we begin to put that career in place of God. I have idols. My grandchildren can become my idols. I love my grandchildren more than I love my kids. Sorry about that. I love those kids. I love them. And when 4 of them said, "We're moving to Arizona," there was not a doubt in my mind. When I was sure that they were leaving, I was gone. I told God what I was going to do. I'm 69 years old. I get to retire. I haven't played any golf in several years because it rains all the time here. I'm going to go play golf. It's hot even in Christmas. We could play golf in Christmas. We could do anything we want. We could hunt rattlesnakes and wild pigs. And the only place in the world I've ever seen, driving down the road in Arizona, I'm sorry, but this is just so odd, it says donkey crossing. Donkey crossing. Yeah, we're gone. I had to make a decision. We made it. Is it God or is it family? See, family is not a bad thing unless you put it ahead of God. You know what Jesus said? You got to forsake your mother, your father, your sister, your brother. Well, actually, it doesn't say forsake in King James. It says hate. Because he was trying to put this thing in order and perspective and priority that God is first. This church has become an idol to me sometimes. Put it ahead of God. Too busy. I'm too busy to pray. I'm trying to get this thing done. You know, I put the church. Listen, my idol was I put this church in front of my family many, many, many times. My boys, they had to suffer for that. My family suffered because of that. The point I'm trying to say is Satan, listen, your enemy will do everything to get you to put anything in God's place. And it is a constant battle to figure it out. And all of us are susceptible. Not just a few. That's why it's so difficult to preach in a small group like this, because see, we're saying, you know, here we are. You know. The main point is this: false gods always promise what only a true God can provide. So here's your prophetic word. I told him in prayer today that I had a prophetic word, but it's not really just my prophetic word. It's Elijah's prophetic word. And it's this: it's time to stop wavering. Stop wavering. Let's get into the sermon now. 1 Kings chapter 18, 17, it says, and when he, this is Ahab, by the way, saw Elijah, he said to him, is that you, you troubler of Israel? Now, Ahab was talking smack. He said, you troublemaker. That's because, well, you know, here's the thing. Ahab didn't think that God was really God, except when, I mean, he served the God of the sky, the prosperity, and a man from, I mean, a man who served God comes and says it's not going to rain, and all of a sudden his God couldn't take care of that. And now he's the trouble. You can't listen, you know what's wrong with false gods and idols? You can't depend on them. They won't help you. When push comes to shove, they won't help you. And he says this, he says, I've not made trouble for Israel, but you and your family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and you followed the Baals. You're the troublemaker. And so he says this, he says, now summon the people from all over Israel to meet on Mount Carmel. And bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So we're going to go to war here. This is going to be a fight. This isn't going to be one of those fights. You ever see that? You ever see, this is back in the oh my goodness, Jackson, the dancer, the singer. Michael Jackson. You ever see him in that music video where they're going to come and fight? And they all get up there and they just dance. I'm thinking, this ain't going to be no dance, okay? There's going to be a battle. So he gets them all together. And think about this, it's 1 against 450. And that doesn't look like good odds, except he knew one thing. How many know this? When you got God, no matter where you are, you're a majority. All right. Elijah went before the people and he says this, how long are you going to waver between two opinions? How long are you going to waver between two opinions? Hebrew word for waver is limp and hobble. How long are you going to limp around and hobble? We get this, there's an English idiom, it's called riding the fence. You ever heard that before? The American Sign Language people, they have a word for waver. They have a way to pronounce it. Is this on? Can I show this? What? Look at this. Ride the fence. It doesn't work. And then he spells waver, but ride the fence. That's exactly what it is. It's riding the fence. When you ride a fence with God, I love this. You always end up is a splintered life. Anyway, yes. He said, Elijah went before the people and says, how long you will waver between two opinions? If the Lord be God, follow him. If Baal be God, follow him. I told you this morning in prayer that follow him, Hebrew, is to die for. This is a life or death situation that Ezekiel's in. He's calling them all up and said, we're going to find out who God is, and how long are you going to waver between God? He said, who are you ready to give your life to? Who are you going to sell out to? I mean, it's kind of crazy. It's like, it would be like him coming in today and saying, what are you selling your life out for? Prosperity? Well, then go for it, man. Just go 100% for it. Just forget about everybody else. Fight your way to the top. Make as much money as you can. Don't worry about who you hurt. Go for it. Just get into it. Or serve God. Or maybe it's the way you look. We live in a society today where everybody's concerned about how they look. There's 75-year-old women who look like they're 24. Thank God. So if you're going to go for your image, you might as well go for it. That's what I said. Go for it. I mean, if you can tan it, if you can tuck it, if you can color it, if you can curl it, do it. Stop messing around. If it's looking for a sexual fulfillment, go for it. Sleep with everybody you can. Any way, anyhow, anywhere, go for it. See, what Elijah is saying is this. If you're going to go for God, go for God. And if you're not going to go for God, then go for that. Jesus says it like this. I would, see, this always confuses me. I would that you would either be hot or cold. Because if you're lukewarm, I'll just spew you out of my mouth. Charles Spurgeon said it like this. He said, if you're going to be saved all the way. If you're going to be saved, you're going to go through it. Listen, I come to this conclusion. You think, man, I don't like the way you're preaching. Well, I don't care anymore. Because I've decided to die for Christ. I've decided that I don't care anymore. I just want to go all the way with God. Quit messing around. Quit hoping things will get better. Quit trying to make friends with the devil. Amen. How long will you waver between opinions? And then look what he said. It was, if the Lord be God, follow him. If Baal be his God, follow him. And listen, and what did the people say? Nothing. Amen? No. You know why they didn't say anything? Because listen, do you know why people follow idols? Because they like the idols. That's why it's hard to preach against idolatry, because now you begin to talk to people at their gut level. Oh, no, you don't. You're talking about things I love. Yeah, I know. God be God, follow him. If Baal's God, well, go ahead and follow him. But God's people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, I'm only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets, so get 2 bulls for us and let the prophets of Baal choose one for themselves and cut it in pieces and put it on the wood and don't set it on fire, and I'll prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, and I won't set it on fire, and then you call on the name of your God and I'll call on the name of my God. And the God who answers by fire, is God. By the way, Baal is always a bull, always shown as a bull. In America today, if we have a good stock exchange, we're at a bull market, aren't we? In Wall Street, there's a picture of a bull. There's actually an idol of a bull. It's up there, isn't it? Yeah. 11 feet tall, 18 feet long. Statue of Baal that they worship. Did you know during COVID they had to build a fence around it and cover it with a tarp because it is their totem. And they all feel like it's good luck if you just come over and touch it. And so they had to keep them from touching it because everybody wants to touch prosperity. And prosperity presents itself in different ways. What he was saying is, let's see if we can get some fire going on here. Let's see what really can light up your life. And then all the people said, what you say is good. What you say is good. You know, this is the saddest part about it, is the prophets of Baal said, this is good, let's do this. Because they still thought Baal could send fire from heaven. They were sold into this. It wasn't like they were trying to beat anybody out of it. They thought this was actually going to happen. And Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls, prepare it. Since there's so many of you call on the name of your God, don't light it. So they took the bull, given to them, they prepared it. And they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. Now, Elijah's going to start talking smack to them again. I told Isaac this morning I was going to use him in the sermon. This is how come. Because normally, I don't know if you noticed this or not, but in the last year, maybe the last 2 years, the Seahawks haven't done that well. And we have been open targets to your abuse. But none without, I mean, this young man is ruthless. He can't wait to get to church. I'm glad we don't know they started playing an hour and a half ago. There's a good chance when church is over, he can come and tell me the score. I always thought, don't tell me the score. I'm going to go home and watch it later. He doesn't care. Just telling you. He always does this. I called him, all week I was talking to Debbie about it, and I kept instead of Isaac, I kept calling him Elijah. That's what I called him. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. You don't have a quarterback. No, that's the other Elijah. He said, surely. He said, shout louder. Surely he's God. Perhaps he's in deep thought or busy. Or traveling, or maybe he's asleep and he must be awakened. The reason I smile at busy is because busy is a Hebrew word, and that's a nice rendering of it. But if you look in it, I'm not kidding you. You can go to anywhere on the internet and look at this. That Hebrew word busy means you're going to the bathroom and you're stopped up. Yeah. Constipated. That's some smear. Listen, you talk about being insulting when you tell somebody your God ate too much cheese. So they shouted louder, and then they began to slash themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, till blood flowed. Midday passed, they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice, and there was no response, and no one answered, and no one paid attention. And the reason is because false gods always promise what only a real God can do. Verse 36, and at the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and he prayed. listen, he didn't dance, he didn't shout, he didn't scream, and he didn't cut himself. There were no time, there was no theatrics, there was no try to build the emotion. He just stood up and he prayed. He said, Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are the God of Israel. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people know that you are Lord, that you, Lord, are God, that you are turning their hearts back again. Now, immediately, no waiting, no dramatic time to wait. It says, then the fire of the Lord fell, burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, licked up the water. Remember, if you read this story, the whole story, he dumps water on top of his sacrifice. This fire is so hot. This is a hot fire. This it just scorched everything. It came down. It took the sacrifice. It took the wood. It took the stones that the altar was made from. It took the dirt around it, and it took the water off. It lit up everybody's life. And they began to shout, man. This changed everything. They began to shout. When the people saw this, they fell prostrate on the ground and cried, the Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. See, it's when God is moving and we are not watching what God is doing, we begin to say there's no hope for America. I'm here to tell you, there's hope for anything. Time to stop wavering. I said, God, if you just, this Sunday, if you just set down a ball of fire in this place, let me step back and consume that. Wouldn't that be good, God? Boy, we'd know what it is. And what if we just went outside and all got to praying and a ball of fire came down in the middle of that quad out there in front of the city hall and just, boom, burned up everything. That'd show them who God is. But didn't God already do that? On the day of Pentecost, He sent the fire. He sent something better than that, by the way. He sent His Son. I don't want to ride the fence anymore. I wonder who's on first. Is God on first? I wrote this down. Start giving God the first part of every day. Start giving God the first part of every dollar. Start giving God the first part of every weekend. Went a little bit farther than that. I felt like God told me, you're not starting off your conversations correctly. I'm first in your conversation. It's been difficult for me because when I come in, I like the social interaction of people, and I catch myself. I'll be talking about football, or I'll be talking about fishing, or I'll be talking about hunting, or I can just talk about everything. And here's what happens. Because of the world that we live in today, there's so much to talk about. The social media is so huge, and we know so much stuff that we begin to talk, and all of a sudden God's left out of every conversation. God's left out of everything that we do because there's so much stuff going on. There's former presidents being impeached, and there's wars and rumors of wars, and there's floods that are taking out thousands of lives, and there's earthquakes that are killing tens of thousands of people, and the world is getting hotter, and the oceans are rising, and it just goes on and on and on and on, and pretty soon in every conversation, everything that we say, everything that we think about is politics or science or fear and fear and fear and fear, and we begin to bow down to the fear instead of bowing down to the presence of God. And we say there's no hope for America, there's no hope for our children, there's no hope for anything. And all God is asking is for someone to stand up and say, I'll take a stand and I'll follow God.
We hope you've enjoyed this message from Grace Church. Make sure to stay connected throughout the week online at gchurch.us and on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week.